I think that he just did exactly what Deruba brought up, which is that when we deal with the issue of white racism, white people don't deal with the fact that they are the ones who are sicker than anybody else in this particular issue, which is why when you deal with the question of race, you cannot deal with what's wrong with these African people. See, the thing that happened in South Central started with a malady in the justice system, where white people could not see white men who had did something against black men and penalize them for what everybody in this country knows that they did. So the problem of white racism is that we don't look in depth and do these little documentaries on white people and what's wrong with them.
All right, now listen up, guys. I have been following up of lately of you know, the Black American histories and the racial, you know, discrimination and hatred, and I can't get enough. I came across this particular video here, and I can't wait for all of us, like literally you there and me here, to watch through the end. And of course, let's get to know what is really eating humanity. What is really into people, and as far as you see, these particular whites and the blacks are concerned in the US in most cases, and what is it that are they not getting you know, right? What is the thing? So I'm also, you know, in the in a quagmire, or I'm also in that particular point of limbo where I need also to find out what is the exact thing that needs to be addressed for all this particular issue to be a thing of the past. We're going to keep on watching, and then at the end of it, guys, I'll come back with more, you know, comments and sentiments over the same. Oh, I forgot. Greetings, morning, evening, wherever you're watching this one from. I go by Liti, this particular platform, and at the end of it, of course, after you also, you know, listened and also gotten maybe something that is burning, let us also know through, you know, the comment section. Do drop us your comment, and yeah, and of course what you think and your sentiments about this particular video, and what needs to be done for this particular issue to be the thing of the past. Let's keep on watching.
One of the problems with the programs of the 60s was that they did not provide corrective measures to help the black family. We need to understand that when black people were brought here to the United States, they were brought here as an act of war. They were kidnapped here, and the destruction of the black family and the creation of a slave mentality was an integral part of the development of this nation state. So there has never been an interest in the black family, and that's reflected today. But even more, every city in which we have aspired to so-called political power. In Newark, black males are being murdered by the Newark Police Department under the guise they're robbing cars. When we look at New York City, the police riot in the streets. When we look at LA, there was a riot in the streets. All of these cities have black mayors. Yes. So we have to begin to understand that moving black people up the economic ladder does not necessarily mean that black people on the bottom of the economic ladder are going to be empowered, because there are black people who identify with the system so much that they are self-hating Negroes.
Mr. Bin Wahad, you seem to be going kaboom to the entire white community. Do we have from you a spirit of belief that there really are out there in America white folks who do not suffer from the pathology that Sister SOULJAH reminds us does exist in this country?
But why is that the question? In other words, it's the same as when you're dealing with the issue in South Africa. People say, well, if black people get in control of that government, what will they do with the white people who are living there? Why is that the question? Can we refocus the question
as to
how we're going to correct?
Let me have a moment. Let me have a moment to defend my question. Okay. If you believe that all people who are white are interested in pillaging, reminding us, as you painfully do, of our own history.
No, that's a mischaracterization. That's a mischaracterization. And first of all, it's the mischaracterization because the Constitution was established by white males with property. It said all men are created equal. Right. And they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. It didn't say women were created equal with men. And the Bill of Rights was attached to the Constitution because people without property had no rights. So I did not say that all white people are interested in burning and looting and pillaging. I am saying that the ideals that established this country were based on burning, looting, and pillaging people's land.
Accept your point. And you concede to us that in contemporary society, we do have honorable people of all colors who have as much of an interest in the salvation of their babies as...
But the problem with that, Phil, is that the people of good intentions in the white community are the minority. They do not stand on principle, and they do not struggle against their own racism and white skin privilege. See, the problem is this. It's like men who say, I understand how you feel as a woman being subjected to sexist behavior.
They can't possibly.
Not without interacting with women and empowering them.
Bill, the problem, though, I think with this whole analysis, as I see it, we're talking, and I have great respect for the Constitution, but let's be frank, it was not based upon an idealistic view of human beings. Deruba doesn't realize that I think that what he's saying is a description of not white people, but all people, was in fact the foundation of America's political philosophy. People are greedy. Give them a chance, they'll beat you up. Give them a chance, they'll kill you, rape you, rob you. That was exactly, if I may say so, the view of human beings, not just white human beings, but most human beings.
Have we moved somewhat off this animalistic, primitive?
The point is, however, that the point that I think I hear, at least, of what Sister SOULJAH says and others say, has less to do, we talk about all this economic redistribution and so forth. Let's talk about the basic issue of politics. The basic issue of politics is power. If you have power over me, you're going to abuse it. If I have no power to resist you, then I'm going to be abused. And I don't care what's in your heart. I don't want to know what's in your heart half the time. I want to know whether there's a weapon in your hand and whether I have the means to defend myself against it. Could be economic, could be social, could be political, could be physical, but I've got to be able to defend myself because I can't trust you. And that's an American statement. That is not a statement of some idealism.
There is no human soul to be found anywhere?
That's not the point. The point is that if you give people power over you and you can't defend yourself against them, our founders said they will abuse you. And the world, if I don't mind saying so, from a black person's point of view, I don't have to prove to you that somebody's out to get me. There are 400 years of history in this country that people are out to get me, and they got me more than half the time. I don't have to prove that to anybody.
Jonathan Kozol, whose seminal book, Death at an Early Age, was a personal account of his own experience of teaching 4th grade in the community of Roxbury, the minority community within the city of Boston. Mr. Kozol, you've been patient, sir. What are your thoughts as you listen in on our dialogue?
Well, I didn't think I'd ever agree with Alan Keyes on anything, but I sure agree with what he just said. I started teaching, as you know, in a segregated school in the mid-'60s. Today, inner-city schools everywhere are more segregated and less equal than they were at the time I set out as a teacher. Inner-city kids I see all over the country are in squalid, ugly, filthy, overcrowded buildings in which not one of us would willingly spend 1 hour. Their lives are more miserable today than they were when I began. By any kind of statistics, I won't drown you in statistics, but there's one which is so devastating, I have to cite it here. As you know, Phil, tracking has come back into schools again. It's become a sort of fashionable way of segregating kids within a single school. Black children, statistically, are 3 times as likely to be tracked into so-called special classes for the retarded as white children, but only half as likely to be put into gifted programs. That is an intolerable statistic in a democracy. And anybody who looks at that and all the other statistics, the fact that black infant mortality is twice that of white children, anyone who looks at those kinds of statistics, or a recent news event, black Haitians being brutally excluded from this country while white Europeans are welcomed at New York International Airport. Anyone who looks at that knows in their heart that racism remains the central moral agony of this society.
So my pleading to Mr. Bin Wahad and to Dr. Keyes in the white liberal tradition of, gee, you don't totally dislike us, do you, is a rather empty
I'll tell you why I think it is, Phil, because, not to criticize you, naturally I'd like to feel, I'm a nice guy, I hope black people will like me, but that's wasted energy. The issue isn't whether they like you and me or not. The issue is whether they have an even shot in this society, and they can't afford to worry about our injured feelings.
I ask for only one moment to defend the question. If the anger is that overwhelming and the evidence supported by your scholarship makes clear their positions, then we have to wonder whether we should even waste any more energy with this ideal of integration and living together and cooperating. I ask you not because I'm an insecure person who wants to be loved. I have children who must live in the society.
Dr. Edwards is the one who spoke eloquently to the point, and that is America herself. America herself will not survive in the 21st century unless she comes to tap into the diversity that is hers and stop pursuing this kind of divisive policy. This is more of a threat to the future of America than anything ever posed by the old USSR. We will explode from within unless we all understand we have a stake in this system. And that's the compelling issue, not whether we like each other, not whether we love each other, not whether it ever started out right, not whether we should be angry with anybody. We won't survive unless we understand we're in it together.
Appreciate very much your comments, Mayor Kelly, and I promise I shall not for the rest of the program ask any member of this audience or panel whether they like me. Please welcome Anna DeVere Smith is the performing artist who is responsible for a much discussed, much heralded one-woman show titled Fires in the Mirror. You wanted to say, Miss Smith.
Well, I wanted to say something about the fact of who's together here in this issue of race. And it's kind of startling to me that we are looking at the issue of race still in black and white, especially since we watched these fires of Los Angeles burn, and it's clear that the story is much more complex than black and white. There are Latinos involved in the story. There are Asian Americans who were taking matters to themselves and standing on roofs with their own guns. So that the dialogue that we had before we decide whether we like white people or not, I think we have to begin to develop strategies and techniques for negotiating our differences over a very broad canvas. And this is going to mean the life and death of many of us. I've worked in the New York City public schools and seen the speed and dispatch with which a naughty boy quickly becomes a retarded boy. It's simply a matter of taking him out of the class on the wrong day and putting him in another class.
What we're talking about here is very clear. If you look at Latin America today, in every society in Latin America, and Latin America is essentially a conglomeration of European settler states. The conquistadores went in there and did the same thing that the English did here and everything, right? When we look at the compositions of these societies, we see that at the top are light-skinned descendants of conquistadores, and at the bottom are native people and black descendants of Africans. White skin privilege is a European ideal and a concept that was exported with their economic system, their religious philosophy, and it was exported and imposed on people of color. So when we talk about Latinos, let's understand what we're saying here. We're talking about Latinos who, for the most part, have African blood in them, and they have internalized racism just like everybody else. When we look at Asian Americans, many of the Asians that came here initially came to work the railroads. They were treated like dogs. They were treated like dirt. But when we see a lot of Asians that come to the United States today, one of the first words they learn in their lexicon, one of the first things that they learn is nigger. The United States' major contradiction around the issue of race is white-skinned male privilege. And if we don't attack that, if we don't analyze that, if we don't begin to deal with that, then we got a problem. And I totally disagree with the mayor of Washington, because I do not have a stake in saving a racist nation. I do not have a stake in maintaining American hegemony over people of color around the world. I do not have an interest in maintaining this system that causes the miseries of billions of people one more moment.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to walk away from our investment in this country and the suffering that we've had in this country since 1619. We gave this country her culture. We gave this country her music. We gave this country her margin of profit with the agricultural revolution, though we never got our 40 acres and a mule. I'll be doggone if I'm walking away from 4 centuries of investment in this country. We, too, are entitled to a piece of the rock. I don't care how wrong America was.
May I call this audience? May I please? We must move on. And in addition to our panelists, we've invited 3 distinguished observers to give their widely differing perspectives on where we go from here. They are Time magazine correspondent Sylvester Monroe, journalist and businessman Tony Brown, and Princeton professor Cornel West. Gentlemen, we do thank you for joining us. Let's begin with Mr. Monroe and the case for government assistance.
From a distance, Chicago fairly shimmers with the promise of
apartheid today in Chicago.
The issue is more than just money. It's also an issue of control and curriculum, and what type of African adults are you trying to produce within that school system. I was in the Intelligent and Gifted Children's program. I went to Cornell University Preparatory. I was on welfare, Head Start, free lunch, free breakfast, forced busing for integration. Every single government program ever created, I have been
here you are on the cover of Newsweek magazine. It must have worked.
That's not the point, because I talked about white people. That was why I was on the cover. They were not celebrating my academic victories.
Your point is made.
Right. So my point becomes, Phil, that how you design those programs. In all of the programs that I attended, all of the education that I had, college, public, and otherwise, nobody ever told me that I was an African woman. Nobody ever told me what the history of African people were. Nobody ever told me that America is business, and without business you will have nothing and be nothing. And nobody ever told me how to organize business so that I would be able to develop institutions in my own community. So now the sincerity of all of the programs and all of the education has to be questioned, indicted, and convicted, because the bottom line is that America is not and has never tried to produce African adults who are functional, self-sufficient, who understand their politics, their economics, and their relationship to the world politics and the world economics.
America's never going to understand that as some abstraction. Communities understand that. You must give communities the power and the control, and finally address the whole point. You can't just pour money into a school. You've got to build up in the community the economic base to sustain the school. You can't deal with these problems in isolation and say, I'll have a good school in a neighborhood with no economic base and no jobs and no businesses. You want decent schools, you've got to develop the communities in which those schools exist so that you have an economic base to support them. You've got to develop the power politically so that the community will be able to control that environment in which the school exists and meet the needs culturally, value-wise, otherwise, that community reflects. And that means that you've got to have power in the hands of that community as a whole. Not in the hands of education bureaucrats, not in the hands of social bureaucrats, but in the hands of the people of the community themselves.
There is a gentleman in our room who believes he has an answer to your very optimistic call for jobs and empowerment. The issue is race. We'll continue following this brief break for your